Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Morrison, and I'm the Senior Director of Standards and Technologies at RTCA, and it is my honor to welcome you to our first RTCA webinar of 2024. Today, we're going to take a look at our foundational standards, or 3 of them, in a webinar we're calling RTCA's Standards Evolving with New Airspace Operations. We have 3 sets of panelists today, so we have a lot to cover, and I want to thank you guys for attending. So if you can't stay for the whole thing or you want to revisit any of the information, this webinar will be posted on the RTCA YouTube channel by May 17th. And also you can find all of the webinars that we have done over the years there. We really enjoy having those out there and would love for you to take a look. Also, we could not do this work without the support of our sponsors. So I'd like to thank both NATCA, who's a gold sponsor, and ALPA, our webinar sponsor, for making this possible today. NATCA asked us to let you know that they will be holding their annual Communicating for Safety conference September 16th through 18th in Las Vegas, Nevada. And you can find more information about their conference on their website. So today, as I said, we're going to take a look at our foundational standards. These are the standards that cross different functions. Whether you're making a radar altimeter or you're making a GNSS system, you need to know about DO-254, which defines hardware processes, DO-178 and the supporting supplements, which define software, and DO-356 and the other security documents, so that you have a good understanding of where your hardware, software, and equipment, how they're going to perform, and to keep everything safe. So we have asked some experts that are members of RTCA to have a conversation about some of the work we're doing in these topics. Our first panel is going to address DO-254 for hardware. So RTCA just kicked off a new Special Committee 243, which is looking at the topic of DO-254, which was published in 2001, and seeing if updates are necessary. So I'd like to welcome Brenda Oker from the FAA, Ray Reynolds from Collins Aerospace, and Chris Cedar from ALPA. Chris, why don't you get us started today with a look at how does hardware look from the cockpit?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Brenda, for that introduction. My name is Chris Cedar. I am the chair of the Aircraft Design and Operations Group for the Airline Pilots Association within our air safety organization. Also a current pilot on the Airbus for United Airlines as well. So at ALPA, our motto is schedule with safety, with one of our underlying primary goals is we do look for one level of safety in everything we do. I don't think there's any disagreement that the system is under stress right now. We have a lot of new entrants into the system. We have a lot of new technologies coming into the system, and we are in a period where technology is quickly entering the industry. And one of the views that we have with DO-254 is that we do like to see this one level of safety, this update of DO-254 that is now about 25 years old, to incorporate some of these new technologies that we can use to increase safety. There's a lot of opportunities out there and a lot of things that we can use to help increase and make sure we keep enjoying this level of safety that we do have within the airspace system as it is. DO-254 and an update of it, we do see that as a new opportunity to re-level technology and how technology is certified and how we can use it within the aviation industry. We're seeing this in a broad range of subjects, everything from airworthiness of UAS to conversions of passenger aircraft to cargo. Just a quick story, I used to fly international cargo, and the operator that I flew for, we actually had a document called an occasional user's guide, where you would have to go in and look and see what hardware is installed and what operating capabilities that you had on the airplane before you would go out and actually fly the airplane. There's a lot of new capabilities out there that could be enabled by updating certification standards. Certif-IA is a good example of that, where we have the airport moving maps. Be a good opportunity to take care of some of the runway excursion and address some of the runway incursion events. Enhanced flight systems, broadband data to and from the airplanes, weather updates and graphics. and improve robustness for navigation systems, multi-source, multi-constellation, anti-spoofing. As we all know, spoofing and jamming within GPS navigation is a major issue that we are dealing with, not only internationally, but in the United States right now. And by updating DO-254, we should have the ability, or we do have the ability, to help bring in some of these technologies and make sure they are available to all of the operators and all of the new certifications that will come into the industry. For example, the improved airplane interfaces, the MICDO, served really well for 45 years, but is something better possible? I am an instructor on the Airbus, and it is one of the things that we really have to teach is how to use MICDO and box work, and making sure that that hardware is properly utilized by the pilots. But is there a better technology out there? And is there something else that we have the ability to use and to grab onto to make sure that, again, we do have that one level of safety, but we also have the best options and the best ability to improve safety in the industry. With that, I appreciate the time. I'd like to hand it on over to Brenda Oker with the FAA.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Oker. I'm with the FAA Policy and Standards Division, and I manage the Avionics Software and Components Unit, which is responsible for the policy related to airborne electronic hardware. I wanted to say thank you to Chris. I don't get a lot of opportunities to work directly with the airline operations side of things in my role, so it was good to hear kind of from a pilot's perspective on this. And I think we can all agree that we need to have a viable path forward for certification of new safety enhancing technology. I did want to start off with a quick overview of the Air 600 organization, since we have made some changes over the last couple of years. AIR is the designation for the FAA Aircraft Certification Service, and they're the ones that oversee design, production, and airworthiness for all U.S. civil products, as well as import of foreign products. Air 600, which is the blue box in the middle, is the Policy and Standards Division. They support aerospace safety by developing regulations, policy, and standards for the design, manufacturing, and airworthiness of aerospace products. And then I'm part of the Air 620 technical policy branch, which is made up of product policy advisors that provide a technical leadership across a broad product level, and subject matter experts, or SMEs, that cover a wide array of technical disciplines. As I mentioned before, I manage the Avionics Software and Components Unit, which is Air 626D. We're responsible, besides airborne electronic hardware, we also have software, AI and machine learning, the aircraft systems information security protection, so ASIP or cybersecurity, as well as HERF and lightning protection within my unit. I also wanted to point out the box for Air 640 and Air 645 in particular, which is our consensus standards management branch. They're the ones that facilitate the FAA participation in development, standards development organizations like RTCA, and they provide program support for the SMEs that are engaged in these standards activities. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to go over kind of how we recognize FAA standards and the FAA policy, and then talk about the FAA policy past, the present, and the future. So starting with a little look at the past here. DO-254 was originally published back in 2000, and then in 2005, the FAA finally issued AC 20-152, and in it, that's where we recognize DO-254 as an acceptable method of compliance for airborne electronic hardware development, but it limited the application to complex custom microcode components developed to A, B, and C. A few years later, FAA issued an order 8110.105 that provided some supplemental information that was included information about simple and complex hardware development, and that was based on some of our experiences with the use of DO-254 over the years. And at the same time, EASA was also publishing some guidance. They had a EASA CM that provided their perspective on things. And the problem was that the FAA guidance and the EASA guidance was not harmonized. And at the same time that this was all going on, we did have a group called the Certification Authority Software Team, which was made up of specialists from FAA, Transport Canada, ANAC, and some of the European authorities and EASA that were working on position papers to address some of the topics in 254 that were still not clear. And we used these position papers kind of to harmonize on topics, but they weren't used for policy for any of the authorities. Anything that we identified as a gap, even through these position papers, had to be addressed through an issue paper on a specific project. So kind of moving into the present, we had a significant, because we didn't have didn't have harmonized policy, we had this significant harmonization effort that began in 2016 and went through 2019. And we began by reviewing all of the FAA and EASA policy that was relative to DO-254 and how we addressed airborne electronic hardware. So we were looking at the AC in the order that the FAA had, as well as the EASA software CM and the CAS papers that were related. And we took a look at those to try to decide, you know, where do we need to make some updates, right? What are the safety risks and where do we need to have some clarification of DO-254? And then we used that to develop a list of topics, and we worked together over several years to kind of come up with a harmonized AC and AMC. So that's resulted in AC 20-152A, which recognizes 254 as an acceptable means of compliance, but it provides some additional guidance and clarifications on specific topics. And then we also released a 0072, which is a best practices AC, and it was used to complement the guidance material that's in the AC 20-152A. And these two ACs combined are technically equivalent to the EASA AMC 20-152A. By using this harmonized guidance now, we are in a position where we've reduced the need for any product-specific issue papers or CREs that we were issuing before, and it ensures that we have a mutual acceptance of compliance from FAA or EASA. So looking into the future, before the FAA begins working on any new standard or updating an existing standard, we're typically asked these three questions. What is it? What are we getting out of it? And how does it align with our strategy? This ensures that we're supporting the FAA aviation safety and aircraft certification strategic goals, priorities, and our executive direction, and that the policy has a viable path to issuance. Now that we have this harmonized AC and AMC that's been in use for a couple of years, it was time to start looking at updating DO-254. So I have been considering, you know, these questions as we go along. So starting with what is it? Obviously, it's the updated guidance to address development assurance for AH, considering all the changes in technology that have happened in the past 20 or so years. The scope of the activity is going to be determined by this RTCA Euro-K committee that Rebecca mentioned earlier. But my expectation is that the update will include the additional guidance and clarifications that we have already agreed to in the harmonized AC and AMC, and possibly refine that material based on our experiences with it over the last few years. And then consider some additional topics with justification. Model-based development for airborne electronic hardware, for example, is something that people have been asking about. So the committee needs to determine if that's within the scope of this activity. So what will we get out of it? I think, as Chris pointed out earlier, we need to make sure that we're addressing all of the potential safety risks and new technology that may not be covered in the current standards or guidance. Fundamentally, it's the FAA's responsibility to ensure, to proactively identify and mitigate the safety risks. This update would also give us an opportunity to provide some more practical approach for applicants that are using things like simple custom devices or COTS devices, or for circuit board assemblies. That's something that was incorporated into the supplemental guidance that was part of AC 20-152A. And finally, you know, how does that align with our strategy? Well, we are able to incorporate the FAA safety continuum by focusing on development of custom, complex custom devices used at a higher criticality, A and B, with fewer objectives that are applicable to the DAL-C applications, and then it's not required for use for DAL-D right now. This also gives us an opportunity to streamline some of our guidance. We've been trying to write guidance that describes what the applicant needs to achieve, but be less prescriptive and how they achieve it, so that they have some flexibility for defining their own processes. Right now, the Joint Committee is working on an internal report that's going to define the scope of the changes and propose a strategy to update DO-254. And I'm looking forward to being part of that committee as we look forward to the future. So now I'm going to hand it over to Ray to talk about the proposed changes from a hardware developer's perspective. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. My name is Ray Reynolds. I'm with Collins Aerospace, where I am a TSO compliance representative for Airborne Electronic Hardware. I'm also an engineering unit member under the Collins ODA and a non-Boeing engineering unit member under the Boeing ODA. Why should we revise DO-254? Since the standard was published over 25 years ago, the AEH device technology available has really evolved. We're seeing increasing levels of complexity and higher degrees of integration. System on chip designs are becoming more popular, and with that comes a more mature availability of a variety of COTS IP to facilitate those highly integrated designs. Along with that, the processes and tools are evolving. The integrated development environments are evolving along with the devices to support system on chip development and integration. As Brenda mentioned, the guidance is maturing. We have, fairly recently released AC 2152 Rev A with additional objectives and guidance in support of DO-254. So since the original AC and the publication of DO-254, the guidance material has matured and should be considered for inclusion in the standard itself. Along with that is industry harmonization. Having a consolidated common point of reference for everyone to follow, a common standard, would be a good thing. As far as topics for consideration, under the revision, requirements management, I think, is important. We're starting to see more of a focus on multi-level requirements as the designs become more complex and more highly integrated. The idea of both top-down and bottom-up requirement approach and requirements captured at multiple levels, and amending or improving the guidance to support that concept. Also integration. Right now, DO-254 doesn't talk a lot about expected integration activities. With these advanced architecture considerations, we may want to consider some more guidance around integration activities, especially with the complexity of system on chip designs. COTS IP, as I mentioned, it's increasing in popularity and necessity as well to facilitate the large, highly complex designs. And along with the complexity comes advanced verification and the need to improve or have further discussion on advanced verification methods. Multi-tier approach, for example, to support the multi-level requirement concept. Looking at verification at different levels as the design comes together through the integration process. And with that, with the increasing complexity, we're seeing the need for more safety-specific analysis and emphasis on formal methods when the traditional approach of elemental analysis becomes more difficult to achieve. Service history is another area we could maybe have some more discussion and more, in my mind, examples. I don't know that we need additional guidance on service history for design elements and development tools, but possibly similar in concept to the examples given for how to classify simple versus complex COTS. We could use some examples on how to leverage service history or design elements and development tools. And then model-based development. We're seeing more use of modeling, if not outright model-based development for AEH. And this topic, I think might still be maturing from an AEH perspective. It's maybe not in the same place that model-based development expectations are for software, for example, but possibly if we look at clarifying advanced verification methods and streamlining or simplifying the discussion on formal methods, it rolls into that discussion, at least some indicators of basic expectations. Okay, the approach, I would suggest managing the scope for a revision A. As was mentioned before, we should align with current mature guidance, support mature technology roadmaps and the current state of the art, and define a baseline and an endpoint for the exercise of developing Rev A. But also consider a roadmap and the idea that we may need or will likely need future revisions. So, the idea that there will be a Rev B, Rev C, et cetera, as additional guidance matures, evolving with the needs of industry and addressing future technology trends, things that are more over the horizon at this point. As far as priorities, maintain product integrity, safety, reliability, security, which wasn't really talked about before. From an AEH perspective, that is something that's evolving, from a system perspective, and will probably have implications for hardware architectures in the future. So we might want to consider how to think about security and commit to get it done. I just put the question mark around 3 years. This is a goal I heard in other meetings, other industry meetings. And I think controlling scope and adopting the concept of a roadmap may help get a revision done within a more aggressive time frame. And with that, I will turn it back over to my fellow panelists, Chris and Brenda.
Thank you all so much for that. Before we go to a question for me, I wanted to give Brenda and Chris, did you have anything you wanted to say about Ray's presentation or each other's?
Nothing I can think of.
So I did get a couple of questions in the chat that are very specific on what is going to be included in the update of DO-254. But of course, I would say we don't know that yet because we haven't written the internal paper. I know you all have experience on committees before, and sometimes RTCA standards, we hear that they take a long time. And I was wondering if you all could give your opinion on why it will take 3 years and why it's important, what drives that schedule. So I will start with Ray.
Yeah, I think it's heavily dependent on gaining a consensus among all the stakeholders. It is a big part of that, and also our availability to participate and coordinate and get everyone on the same page.
I do agree with that. Chris?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with Ray that it's the biggest thing is trying to gain the consensus among everyone. Everyone has a different point of view and ideas they bring in that we need to come to an agreement with that. In addition to a lot of the scheduling complaints, because we have a lot that we are all doing at the same time.
Yep, nobody that writes a standard full time. I just help committees write standards full time. Brenda, I know you have a slightly different perspective as the regulator, but you've done this a while. What do you think?
I think, yeah, certainly defining the scope, right, is important at the beginning before we start this, and committing to a timeline is going to be important. You know, our role is different because, you know, it's an industry consensus standard, but we're trying to make sure that it's something that we can accept in a policy document later. But it takes time to build that consensus, I think is what we're all saying. So.
It certainly does, and we appreciate all the time each of you put into the committees. And all of our members. I'm looking forward to welcoming the group the last week of May. So I will see you again then. Thank you very much for your participation, both in this webinar and our committee work. And now we do have 2 more sessions to do today, so I want to be sure to get to them. But I will tell you that all of the sessions we're doing today, as well as publishing the standards, we have training available at RTCA on them in case you want to learn more and dive deeper. And I mention that because on our next panel, we have one of the people who gives our training. We turn now to software and DO-178 and the supporting supplements. We have a special committee that was established in 2020, the Special Committee 240. And right now they are hard at work on completing a supplement to DO-178C that will address commercial off-the-shelf software and open source. So please join me. I'd like to introduce Mike Vukas of the FAA, Patty Bath of Belcan, and Mark Lillis of Atlantic Certification Group. Mike is going to start us off to give us some perspective on how software gets accepted at the FAA and where we're going. And then Mark and Patty and I will come back for a conversation around the new supplement. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here. My name is Mike Vukas. I'm a senior software specialist. I work under Brenda Oker that you guys just were introduced to previously. I work in the avionics software and components unit. And I've been asked today to kind of give an update on software policy for the FAA, where we're at, and what we're currently working on that may be added to it. So I appreciate it. Next slide. Thank you very much. So I need to do mine. Sorry. So basically the current FAA software policy, as Brenda alluded to earlier, same thing with the hardware, is that in between 2016 and 2019, there was a significant effort to harmonize between the FAA and YASA. During those years, there was a harmonization with software that was published between the 2 authorities. There was a joint publication of an AMC and an AC 2115D for those that don't know that occurred in 2017. These publications between the 2 authorities are basically technical equivalents that recognize DO-178 and their supplements. Next slide, please. So in this newly released policy that was harmonized, it recognizes DO-178C, DO-330 tool qualification, DO-331 model-based development and verification, DO-332 object-oriented technology, DO-333 formal methods, and DO-248C, which is the supporting information. Next slide. So, and to talk a little bit about what Rebecca was informing everyone about SC-240. SC-240 was originally initiated by the Form of Aeronautical Software, the FAST team. It was basically made up of an ad hoc group that formed an investigation for the constraints that developers may have for UAS that they would be facing when using DO-178 and its supplement. The report was published and it was outputted in the paper number, the RTCA paper number, as I have on my slide here. So if anybody wants to look that up and review it. One of the other topics that came up was the introduction of how we introduce COTS and open source software into our current software policies and so forth. So we can take advantage of some of the COTS and open source software that continues to grow out there as time evolves. So with that said, you know, there was also a determination that not only would that help serve UAS and eVTOLs that are being developed today, but also it would provide great benefit and value to our current software suite that we currently have under DO-178 and the RTCA. So the UAS are comprised of the air segment, ground segment, and the communication segment. So there's additional need for the introduction of COTS and open source because lots of this stuff already is out in industry, but just trying to find a way to get itself in and being certified in current and existing products that are being introduced. So the regulatory framework that we have within the FAA starts with the rules 1309, 1301, 2510 for Part 23. The means of compliance to those, as I was stating earlier, is AC 2115D. That's how we approve software. Those are the approved and recognized standards that RTCA and industry has produced and is acceptable by both YASA and FAA. Current involvement right now is that we are working on a COTS and open source software supplement to DO-178 on how we would be able to introduce COTS and open source software and leverage that as an addition to the suite. And where we see that fitting is that basically it will be a additional supplement and it will sit under the other supplements in DO-115D. And upon being recognized and approved, we see that as being added to a new release of the AC 2115 and just be a new harmonized release between YASA and the FAA. And both this COTS and open source software committee, it is a joint effort between YASA and the FAA. So we have both SC 240 and Working Group 117 that are working this tirelessly to find approval process to get COTS and open source into the current software approval to take advantage of some of the stuff that's already been out there, has pedigree, has been out there with good records and no problems, and you know, take advantage of that and bring cycle times down. So that's where we are today.
Thank you for that, Mike. And I really appreciate you giving a shout out to our colleagues at EuroK and YASA because it does add so much more value when we're harmonized and it's the same process around the world. And, you know, we always try and make it look like it's one committee and everyone working together. I'd like to ask Patty and Mark to come back on because I do have a couple questions after Mike's very, very good job of setting the framework. Patty, I'll start with you because I know that you were involved in, well, I think you all were somewhat involved in DO-178C and have used it extensively. what are the benefits that a software supplement brings to the industry?
If you don't mind, Rebecca, before I answer the specific question, I thought it would be helpful to provide a glimpse into the premise of the new upcoming supplement for DO-178C and DO-278A. I know we talked a lot about airborne, but we do have the ground-based aspects as well. As a side note, we commonly refer to DO-178C and DO-278A as our core documents. As with all the DO software supplements, they don't stand alone. And one of these core documents will also be applicable. Both the need for alternative guidance in the aerospace domain and the committee's scope were to develop guidance specifically for COT software and open source software. This is not intended for an applicant that may have software lying around and they want to bypass one of the core documents. Just thought I'd mention that. This supplement is fulfilling a specific need, which is that it can be extremely challenging in many cases to obtain the required software artifacts from vendors or from user communities, or to reverse engineer those artifacts effectively. Therefore, the supplement's guidance is based upon a black box approach. For example, the objectives and activities do not require the use of source code to fulfill them. However, source code may make some of the activities a little easier. And although source code is not required from a technical sense, one of our latest advancements in the committee and the supplements, as we're getting close to trying to put that out for FRAC and OC, is that we will have the requirement for source code to be accessible. And that's going to be required for the purposes of accident investigation. Still have the black box approach, but have it available if necessary. The supplement has a rigorous assessment process and an incorporation process. And this incorporation process entails a correlation with the majority of the core document processes that we're all familiar with, and then specifically detailing additional objectives and activities that are needed to integrate the software into the overall software product. The naming of the incorporation process also has significance, as the supplement is not intended for COT software or open source software to be the overall software product. The supplement provides a means to incorporate that software into the overall software product. And lastly, there are provisions for modifications to the software as well. So getting back to your specific question, the benefit the supplement provides is opening up the possibility of use within the aerospace domain to a whole new portion of available COT software and open source software that were previously not pursued under the core documents. That sounds great. It's worth noting, though, that although the methodology of the supplement is different, it is being developed to an equivalent level of safety as the core documents. And because all of the objectives and activities will need to be met, there still may be some software that may not be suitable for the supplement's application. Thanks for the question, Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks for that detailed explanation of how the supplement will fit in the larger picture. I want to turn to Mark, and since you're our trainer of the software supplements at RTCA, we do training on the supplements and the core document. You're very familiar with the existing supplements. How does this supplement differ from the existing supplements that are in use today?
Sure. So the existing supplements, and those are, as Mike mentioned, formal methods, object-oriented, and model-based. Those supplements today, they cover two documents, actually, 178 and 278, where 278 is our ground-based. We always kind of talk about 178, and really there's this whole other parallel document that's 278, and that covers CNS ATM, which is all your surveillance, navigation, communications. It's done for air traffic management, for example. And when we look at the difference between the documents 278 and 178 with respect to this new supplement, you'll see that the existing 278 actually has some decent amount of guidance for COT software, where the guidance for the airborne is much more limited. So what we're doing with this supplement, as Patty explained, it's kind of a different approach. Yeah, you could use the core documents process, but you might find it extremely limiting or unavailable to you because of, say, missing artifacts. So we're trying to leapfrog that idea of missing artifacts and give you a new approach. Because of that, we're not going to be this one-to-one, section by section kind of delta document that supplements are today. Supplements kind of today look like the core document with deltas. We're not doing that. We're giving you an alternative approach when you have CODs or open source. And because of the challenges of this, currently this supplement is limited to level C and level D in the airborne and AL 3, 4, and 5 in the ground-based. So we really weren't able to make the jump of how do we go and handle level A and level B equivalent safety when treating things as a black box. And, so you won't find that in the training. What you're going to learn in the training is it's C and D, and it's a different approach. And it's things like, as Patty said, it's not the whole software. It's not a full operating system. Think of these as drivers, file systems, maybe to talk to something, a screen driver, an interface. These are the kind of chunks of software you might steal. And you may also steal larger chunks of software from maybe the transportation, automotive, or medical industry.
Thank you for that, Mark. And and you answered one of the questions that was in the chat. Actually, several people asked it about was no source code for DAL-A, which has been a conversation of the group I've listened to. I think I'm going to throw this one to Mike though. And so is there still value for C and D? If you can't use everything, do you still find this do you have applicants who will find this worthwhile?
Yes, so we have applicants in all areas from UAS to eVTOLs, and even in traditional aircraft that the COTS, the amount of COTS that are existing out there that have that have been developed, especially like in the automotive industry and so forth. The interest is very high on how we port that over. It may not be done exactly like the DO-178, but it's just a matter of what Patty was saying is doing an assessment on what they can bring over and assessing it and how we can get that into avionics.
Great. Thank you for that. So that did answer a couple of questions in the chat, and I'm going to throw one more question back to Mark. What value does this bring to the industry to be able to use software and not start with the clean sheet?
Yeah, I think we've always made the assumption that somehow if we started from ground zero with a DO-178 or 278 process, we would definitely create a better product. And if you had to lower the criticality, you had to use hardware partitioning, an IMA, etc., to create the ability to use maybe this lesser, well, I'll just call it lesser software in a higher domain product, like say level C. And so we're giving you a framework to do a non-partitioned with potentially a wrapper approach and other verification activities to put, say, a sensor interface, a LiDAR, other commercial off-the-shelf sensors that may come with both, hardware and software. I can now take that software. I can use the experience of that industry. We won't call it service history because there's this whole issue of how do we do the math on service history? But we're going to say, as Mike said, there's a pedigree to that software. It's been proven and used maybe in another industry, et cetera. And I can bring that in and I can get that equivalent level of safety and probably potentially better verification aspects and save a lot of money without impacting safety, maybe even increasing safety because of this other domain, whether it's open source software with a wide user domain of support people or just general cuts, where the applications may be in the hundreds, thousands, or millions of units out in the field.
Thank you for that. I'd like to thank all three of you for participating in our webinar today and your commitment to the Special Committee 240. For those who are interested, we do have the tour and the expected progress of all of the work of Special Committee 240 on our website. We also have the training available, and the next meeting for RTCA Special Committee 240 will be with UK Working Group 117 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the week of July 8th. So if you're interested, please reach out. We do always want to include everyone, all stakeholders in the conversation as we work these standards. So Patty, Mark, Mike, thanks again for your time today. So
thank you.
Hold on, we're not done. We have one more section to go. So, and that is we're going to talk about our security documents. Now we actually have several security documents, but we just called it the security section. Today, I am happy to welcome Marty Reynolds from A4A, Jan Hennig from Gamma, and Patrick Morrissey from Collins Aerospace. I am not their program director, and I wanted to let them talk about where they see the safety standards, why they're important, and why you should be concerned. Again, Special Committee 216 is an active committee, so this is work they're doing right now. So, gentlemen, please take it away.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think I'm kicking this off and then we'll go around the room here. But when it comes in context of 178 and 254, when it comes to software and hardware, the work of 216 is probably the new group among those work activities. But looking back in time, 216 was charted almost 2 decades ago now, back in 2007. So 2 decades, it's certainly not a green committee, and a great deal of good work has been done, not only by the RTCA team, but like you mentioned before, in collaboration with the UK team and many international stakeholders. So as I mentioned, 216 was kicked off in a request from an avionics supplier and an aircraft manufacturer in 2007. We were starting to see connected aircraft connectivity at a new level. And the dialogue got underway. What was really good about it starting at that point in time, even though at that point the aircraft across the board were not necessarily that highly connected, was that from where I sit, and I'm more on the regulatory and policy side, when the FAA came knocking on our door in 2014 and said, cyber is becoming a big issue, the US government is engaging in this topic, the world is becoming much more complex, we had a starting point. And that starting point was the expertise and the standards that have been developed in 216. At that time, 326, 355, 356, and so forth. So the FAA stood up a rulemaking group, and it's already been mentioned earlier. It's the ASIS working group, Aircraft System Information Security and Protection. And it met for about a year. The support was from across the manufacturer community. We had A4A there. We had ALPA. We had several airlines, but also from the regulators. It was FAA, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, Transport Canada, ANAC Brazil, plus several government agencies like DoD, Coast Guard, and others. So it became a forum where we looked at the existing standards, but we also up-leveled a little bit and looked at the way forward from a policy perspective. So what came out of that? There were 30 recommendations. One of them pointed to the need to really close up the rule space and assert that the FAA has clear authority in this area.
but it also provided direction back to 216 to do some work to move the standards forward. And that got underway. The FAA started its implementation activities, and that was positive. Setting aside our regulators and shifting to the U.S. Congress, if you go back to the middle of the last decade, again, cyber was front and center. There were articles quite frequently about aviation and cybersecurity. Some of them, it's a somewhat salacious topic. There were some stories that were clearly misinformed, but we were in a position to say we're working with the government. The technical standards are matured, and the aircraft that meet certain criteria, the FAA are applying special condition to those aircraft. And the means of compliance, the way to meet those special conditions is through the documents generated under the RTCA URK umbrella. Congress did weigh in. If you look at the 2016 FAA Extension Act, the 2018 reauthorization, that is probably still the reauthorization we are living under for a few more minutes today, May 15th. Congress did point to RTCA in this work and said, we, from the public perspective, from the elected officials' perspective, cyber needs to be addressed, and we have a starting point here with ASIP and 216. We do expect a 2024 reauthorization. It does actually have about a half a dozen new provisions that discusses cybersecurity. Some of them point to the need for rulemaking and leveraging the work that's been done here. But I would expect in some of the areas, Patrick and I just talked a couple of days ago, there's some areas that warrant clarification, and potentially I would see a potential. We still need to look at the final text, tasking back to 216 to do some of the technical work that the policy developers have come up with. So again, good work being done in this area. For the immediate near term, we should expect an FAA rule, the long-awaited one, to be published any day. It was slated for April of this year, and I'm told by the agency that it's short final. We should see it any day. And I venture to say the collaboration will still continue. We see other agencies weigh in on aviation security. TSA came knocking on our doors a couple of years ago, and we led them down the path to the work that's been done with the FAA, with the ASIS, with 216. And I think that really helped TSA take on this new challenge for that agency. We've established the connection so that FAA and TSA are working together, and other government agencies that are weighing in the space as well. So with that said, I think, Marty, you're up next. Over to you, sir.
Well, Jens, thanks so much for that. And Patrick, Jens, it's great to be on another panel with you. I feel like I'm rehacking my panel currency with you guys, so it's great to be here with y'all. I thought, what I just start talking about a little bit is about why it's so important to have these standards in place. Like Jens talked about, cybersecurity may be somewhat new in the standard setting arena, but it's, aviation and standards have been hand in hand since the beginning. In fact, my organization, although it's called Airlines for America today, it used to be Air Transport Association, got started in 1936, primarily focused on standards. And it's been over those course of years, the standard setting bodies like RTCA have been fundamental to setting up these standards. And I was just kind of writing through the other speakers, some of the key words they said too, and things like streamline, safety, efficiency, better outcomes. And then really the harmonization is the word that I really keyed on. And I thought, just in the interest of time, I'll use a very, very short example where how standardization and the work in 216 is doing is just amazing. And I really appreciate their work. But like one example on the regulatory side that would be really helpful to have standards and harmonization would be like incident reporting. So for the airlines in particular, we've got 11 different federal agencies that actually have some kind of harmonization or some kind of standard or non-standard reporting requirement that we have to follow. What's interesting in that is that all 11 don't have just one, some of them have multiple. So in fact, we actually have 21 different reporting frameworks that we're supposed to follow. And those of you that make standards know how hard it is and tough it is. Can you imagine, though, if you don't have a standard, that you have to follow something that has different definitions, thresholds, timelines, everything else that goes with it. And then you at the other end, not only are you trying to figure it out, but the OEMs are trying to figure it out themselves, the regulators. So I use that as an example to say that, hey, listen, standards are hard, they're difficult, they're challenging. But for my one point I'd like to make for everyone on here is that, hey, get involved, please join in, because we need your help, we need your expertise to build out these standards, because they're so important for all the reasons I just mentioned. Patrick, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Marty. And excellent transition there, asking for help, because I had made a note that that's something that I wanted to make sure that we did. So I did see a quick question on there. I wanted to reflect on that briefly. Question in the chat: can you elaborate on the nature and the content of the pending rule? Jens, I'm assuming that references into 25.13.19, which will also cover, I think, parts 33 and 35 or
I
37.
think it's evolved a few times, but again, it's in the what's called the Unified Regulatory Agenda issued by the U.S. government. If you look at the fall 2023 version, there's a little bit of a footprint in there, but last briefing I got from our federal friends, yeah, that's exactly where it's at.
Yep. And so what that will be is that will be the guidance. It's going to be parallel to the rule. From what we understand, our expectations are that it will be parallel to the rules that were set by EASA for 25.13.19, and that's for consideration of cybersecurity in the design of aircraft systems as it impacts safety. So that's not everything, right? The certification is specifically concerned with safety, not necessarily, financial impacts, loss of personally identifiable information, right? It's, as aviation regulation has always been, it's very centered on and focused on safety. As Jens gave a little bit of the history there, the suite of standards that the SE216 group works on today, and I'm a co-chair of that committee, is we have a suite of, I'm looking at 7 published documents, and we'll show them to you later. One is DO-356A, which is the Airworthiness Security Process Specification. That's accompanied with a standard DO-356A, which is the Airworthiness Security Methods and Considerations. So those 2 documents, I would say, make up the coupling of the what you have to do, right, is in the Airworthiness Process Specification, but then what are some ways to go about doing it, right? Some examples of how this often happens with standards, right? Well, and as Brenda Acker mentioned, right, the FAA focuses on make sure we give what has to be done, not necessarily the how to do it. And so as we release a standard like this, it goes out to the industry, and the industry gets a little time to absorb it. And then generally they come back with questions and points of confusion. And some of the things that will be clear on how to achieve the what in that set of objectives, but in other places it'll be a little too spongy, and it's important to have a little bit of that feedback loop. And so industry will come back and they'll have a series of questions and updates that they're looking for, and that's when you get to Rev A of this document and Rev B of this document. And so as these standards evolve, it's really a working relationship with the industry. It's a long working relationship because releases don't come fast and quick. But going to what Marty said, having a stakeholder, having a voice at the table is very important. And as a chair of a committee that has a current thread of work that's pretty expansive, we're always looking for people to come and contribute. So if you're a member, we'd love to have you attend. So continuing on with the discussion about a few of those standards that we have. Another one is DO-355. That's information security guidance for continued airworthiness. So the rule that Jens mentioned is coming out, says that we have to certify aircraft with consideration for cybersecurity impacts to safety. Along with that is the requirement for an OEM or a supplier to give any guidance associated with maintaining that security of the operation of the equipment, whether it's an aircraft or what I want to say, buyer furnished equipment, that's installed after the fact as part of an STC. Then we do have some guidance, additional guidance that's come out. These are not specifically invoked by a rule at this point. There's the Aeronautical Information System Security Framework Guidance, that's DO-391. The Information Security Event Management Guidance, that's DO-392. And DO-393 is the process standard for security certification and declaration of ATM ANS ground systems. So you can see this kind of expansive scoping of different areas that the group has thought about and brought together and produced some standards on to help the community respond, and how to think about, as a community, how do we solve these problems. For the most part, something Marty mentioned about working in harmony. The SE216 group works very closely with the WG72 group, and we try and stay as harmonized as we can, right? Because where our standards are harmonized, that even benefits us, even if our regulatory baseline isn't harmonized, because they aren't always, but many times one will advance quicker and the other will come along the side a few years later. But if our standards and our goals are harmonized, as us as industry participants work together to create harmonized guidance, then when rules become more uniform over time, we're all working in the same way. And that makes everybody's job a little bit easier. So I would note that we've got a current scope of work. We are evolving DO-356 from Rev A to Rev B, responding to some of the community's needs. We also have an evolution to DO-355 to go from Rev A to Rev B, I believe, on our radar. That's a new addition. We're also working on two new standards. One on what we call our DSEC standard around aviation data security and how to maintain security on different pieces of information that move through our ecosystem that are part of the supply chain. And then our ISMS standard that we're working on, which is about dealing with and helping companies find a way to be compliant to the emerging EASA regulation of what's called Part IS. And that's more of a holistic organizational, think about a safety management system, but put in place for information security. And again, extending into the organization, how do you structure your organization, process, and policies to ensure that you don't have a means to impact safety through something that happens within your organization and the development that it does. So with that, I'm being super cognizant of time. I think Rebecca, are there any other questions that maybe you wanted to field or kick out?
So there weren't any other questions from the audience yet, but I will ask a question of all three of you, in that you all have done my job for me and highlighted the work of 216 is ongoing. We work with EuroK Working Group 72. What voices would you like to see from new members of the committee if people are interested? What are some of the expertise you'd really wish to get in the committee to help you? And that's for all of you.
I'll start and then hand it to Patrick, who's the lead of this little machinery. To me, and I hinted at it, there are a number of U.S. government agencies and other agencies that are actively looking at cybersecurity. My first point to be made is before they jump ahead and try to take on the problem by themselves, can you put your experts in with the 216 community, because we're all rowing the boat in the same direction, and expertise from FAA is outstanding, other regulators. I mentioned TSA's involvement. We've strongly encouraged that. Other agencies are involved with the cybersecurity environment more broadly, and I'd encourage them to be there as well. Patrick, over to you as a lead of the machinery.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna do a quick request and kind of hand this down to Marty, because a big participant here, Marty started with mentioning the example of incident reporting, right? How do you do incident reporting? Well, we have a standard, but it's in that kind of evolution stage. I would call it like initial guidance, and I think there's need for more. Well, guess who we need on the committees to help out with that is some of the people that are going to suffer and struggle with those reporting requirements. And that is OEMs, it's the supply chain, it's my company Collins as we build equipment, but also my buddy Marty and the airline group that he represents.
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess I would say that if you could get like from the airline perspective, if you can get one airline to participate, that's great. But if you can get across, the different functions, even better. On our council, we've got folks that are from tech ops, cybersecurity. We have attorneys. We've got folks from government affairs. The cross section of people that you have to have in the room to talk about new standards and the implementation of regulations isn't just the cyber folks. And so anytime you can get more cross section, I really like what Jens said too. Like the more of the potential regulators who are participating in these and they can learn through the process, the better we all are.
And that's a great point. Like having one representative for a whole sector of the industry doesn't always reflect the diversity of organizational structures and processes and policies, right, that exist in those environments. And it helps to have more representative views at the table, because that creates a more harmonized view because we have much more diverse understanding of how we work and a much more diverse set of representatives sitting at the table. So that's a great comment.
Yes, thank you. And I thank all three of you, Marty, Jens, and Patrick, for participating in the webinar and your continued commitment to the work of 216. 216, if I'm right, Patrick, will be meeting here in Washington, D.C. The week of June 24th, I believe, that you'll be here the week of the PMC meeting as well. I did see the question in the chat. RTCA is a membership organization and we would welcome new members, but we also have a commitment to transparency. You'll find agendas and minutes on the website of the special committee pages so you can track the work. And our plenaries are open to the public for observation. So you can contact myself or any of the program directors for help in getting more involved, seeing what's there. So, and what the specific issues are. And on that note of documents, I'm going to ask the team to pull the last slide up with the list of documents. I know you have them all memorized, Patrick. I do not. So I like to have a cheat sheet. We have the list of published standards and the work in process that we're hoping to complete in the next couple of years, and then it'll be time to revise the other ones, right?
That's correct.
Awesome. Jens, Patrick, Marty, thanks again. You said it better than anyone of the RTCA staff could about how important this standard is. So with that, that is our webinar for today. I know this was a little different from the ones in the past. I really want to thank our sponsors, NACA and ALPA, because we could not do this without our sponsors and provide this as a service to the public. And it will be on YouTube by May 17th. I also wanted to let you know about our training courses. So all of these documents have training at RTCA on them. We also just want to say another foundational document we didn't address today is DO-160. We're hoping to do a future webinar addressing the new revision of DO-160 that's coming in by 2026. At the conclusion of this webinar, we will be sending you a survey that will ask if your thoughts on these topics, but also are there other topics you would like to discuss on the existing standards or any webinar topic you would like to suggest. And later this summer, our second webinar in 2024 is going to focus on mobility as a service. More information on training, membership, upcoming events, past recordings are all available at www.rtca.org. And I thank you so much for spending this time with us. Goodbye.